Although AZT could not have been developed without government funding and research, a private company, Burroughs Wellcome, holds the patent, which allows it to set the price, a price the taxpayer often pays, an estimated $420 million so far, to buy AZT for AIDS patients who cannot afford it themselves. But the lucrative Burroughs Wellcome monopoly may be coming to an end. Our medical reporter George Strait has tonight's agenda report.
At a major drug company just outside Toronto, these chemists are making AZT, the only drug proven to be effective against the AIDS virus. And they are making it at a price many more patients can afford. Luciano Calenti owns the company.
It's going to be about 50 cents a capsule. It still is an expensive capsule, but it shouldn't cost much more.
The Burroughs Wellcome Company, which has exclusive rights on AZT in this country, now sells it for $1.20 a capsule, or about $3,500 a year, more than twice what Canadian companies will charge. When AZT first went on the market 3 years ago, Burroughs charged $10,000 a year.
We charge a price that we think is appropriate in order for us to get a return to support our R&D effort. And we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this drug so far. And therefore, we had to have a price that would give that return, that could support that research.
But many critics do not believe Burroughs spent that much on research for AZT. They say, prove it.
Put it out for people to analyze. Let people see the books. They won't do that. Challenge them. Put it on the table. They won't give it to the Congress.
Congressman Ted Weiss has asked to see the books, but Burroughs refused.
It's hard to believe that they had as heavy expenditures as that, since the product was really discovered, tested for practical purposes, developed by the federal government.
Because the government shouldered much of the development costs for AZT and approved it for use in record time, congressional investigators estimate Burroughs' costs were no more than $25 million. But Burroughs reports it has grossed more than $700 million in sales in 3 years. Burroughs says it, like other drug companies, used profits from one drug to pay for research into another.
I will guard like a dog, like a junkyard dog, our ability to spend the money on the research on new antiviral drugs, new anti-AIDS drugs.
Burroughs says its research and development budget for AZT is $1 million a day, but government investigators estimate that less than 20% of that money is actually spent on research. The rest goes for things like promotion and trips to scientific meetings around the world. At a recent congressional hearing, a former drug company executive said the price of drugs like AZT is often determined by the severity of the illness.
The price of prescription drugs is clearly determined by what the market will bear, and pain, suffering, and desperation will support a high price indeed.
There is no question the price of AZT could be lower. These chemists at ACIC in Toronto prepared hundreds of pounds of AZT ready for shipment at 1/3 the cost. ABC News has learned that another company, Apotex Incorporated, has bought the AZT and will ship it to countries where Burroughs Wellcome does not have a patent. So beginning this week in the Bahamas, American consumers will be able to buy the drug by mail using this order form. The price? 89 cents a capsule, 1/3 less than what Burroughs charges. While this kind of importation is technically illegal, the FDA says it has neither the staff nor the inclination to stop it. And there is another challenge to Burroughs Wellcome. ABC News has learned that Apotex and another Canadian drug company, Novapharm, have just challenged the Burroughs patent in Canada, paving the way for similar court challenges in this country. Private industry is now doing what many say the U.S. government should have done 5 years ago. The NIH played a major role in the development of AZT, but the government let Burroughs Wellcome gain a monopoly many believe it does not deserve.
I think they're embarrassed, and I think that they realized after AZT that they should have done something. They realized it in hindsight, that they should have protected the price of this drug in some way. They had the flexibility to do so, and they dropped the ball.
And many at the National Institutes of Health agree. They admit that AIDS patients and other taxpayers have paid a heavy price for that inaction. Officials acknowledge that allowing Burroughs Wellcome alone to set the price for AZT should never have happened. George Strait, ABC News, Research Triangle, North Carolina.
AZT is enormously expensive, as much as $3,500 per person for 1 year's supply. The question is, how did a single private company get exclusive rights to such a crucial and profitable drug? Tonight's Agenda reporter is George Strait.
Joe Franco depends on this drug to stay alive. It is AZT, and for 3 years it has helped him fight off the effects of the AIDS virus. But that fight has been expensive.
I don't like to say I have AIDS. I like to say that AIDS has me. It also has you in a way that you don't know because you're paying for my medication.
AZT is so expensive and so vital that the government has had to pay most of the costs to keep patients alive. Overall, taxpayers have paid an estimated $420 million of the $700 million spent to buy AZT. And all of the money ends up here at the Burroughs Wellcome Company. It has the legal monopoly on selling AZT, primarily because it has the patent.
The world would not have AZT, Retrovir, if it were not for Burroughs Wellcome Company.
But many disagree. Even though protests like this forced the company to lower the price of AZT, many question the company's exclusive right to control that price.
What did you discover? What did you invent?
What we discovered was that this was a potentially useful drug in patients with HIV infection.
That's your invention.
That is correct.
And where was that published?
That was published in a variety of publications.
Name me one or two.
Well, I don't have them right in front of me.
In fact, this compound was not discovered by Burroughs Wellcome. Government scientists invented AZT and were the first to test it in humans.
This drug was developed here, of course, in 1964.
Dr. Jerome Horowitz is the man who invented AZT 26 years ago at the old Michigan Cancer Institute in Detroit. He abandoned the drug when it proved ineffective against the disease he was studying, cancer. 10 years later in Germany, the next crucial discovery. Dr. Wolfram Ostertag showed AZT was effective in killing retroviruses, rare organisms that scientists would later determine to be the cause of AIDS. And finally, in 1985, Drs. Sam Broda and Mitch Mitsuya of the National Cancer Institute, using a unique test that they discovered, showed for the first time that AZT stopped the human AIDS virus from multiplying.
People have to realize, the tremendous contribution that the government scientists made to this thing. So they essentially then took a drug from the public domain, which had no medical use, and made it a practical reality as a therapy for AIDS.
In fact, back in 1984, government scientists, without ever questioning who would profit, were collaborating with several private companies, including Burroughs Wellcome. Burroughs sent more than a dozen compounds here to Dr. Broder's laboratory, chemicals it hoped would work against the AIDS virus. AZT was one of them. Dr. Broder had to do the testing because Burroughs refused to risk working with the live AIDS virus in its own laboratories. Within 2 weeks, success. Dr. Broder wrote, "The results look quite promising." 3 weeks later, Burroughs applied for a patent in Britain. No American government scientist was given any credit. And 6 months later, Burroughs applied for a U.S. patent, again claiming all the credit for itself. But that application was rejected for insufficient data. Burroughs reapplied, included Dr. Broder's data, and the patent was eventually accepted. At the time, Dr. Broder expressed his pride in the work of government scientists.
Basically, AZT is a demonstrable product of the viral cancer program of the National Cancer Institute in an area where there has been a great deal of research.
That was almost 5 years ago. Now Dr. Broder's pride is turned to private anger. He believes Burroughs has rewritten history to protect its patent and control over the price of AZT. He cannot speak publicly because the NIH is considering a number of options, including suing Burroughs Wellcome. In fact, a number of private attorneys have advised the government that such a suit would be successful.
If the government had been a co-inventor, then the government would have been able to call the tune in terms of pricing. We paid to invent it, and now we pay to buy it back. It's sort of the healthcare version of the savings and loan scandal.
Unless a better treatment is found, Burroughs' profits will continue to grow with the increasing number of AIDS patients who need AZT. And unless someone succeeds in challenging the Burroughs Wellcome patent, those profits and its exclusive control over the price of AZT will last into the next century. George Strait, ABC News, Washington.